So I went to look back at the blend file and it turns out I may not have to do any reparenting at all. I may only just have to rename bones. So if that's the case, I can still use animations. So let's go and rename bones in ModelDoc and see what results we get. So if you don't already have a bone name prefab, what you would normally do is click on Add, Bone Rename, Rename, there you go, Rename Bone. And you'd select like one bone name. And so original bone name is what the bone is originally. Obviously, the new bone name is what you want it to be, which is a name that is probably likely source to standard. Or if your bone is named something like bone 0 zip, it can, the new bone name can be something a little more specific. So when you're animating this character, you can be like, oh, I know what that bone is, instead of being like, what the heck is bone lol? I don't know. So for example, we have, well, somewhere in here, we have pelvis root. There it is, which is what we want to rename to pelvis. So first, we're going to rename this pelvis bone to hip. So we'll rename pelvis to hip. That needs compiling. Then on this model modifier list, you can right click and then you can add a bone rename, or we right click on the model modifier list here. You can see there's an add rename bone option, so you don't have to type it in every time. Original bone name can be, well, we're renaming pelvis root to pelvis, right? So pelvis underscore root. And if the bone name is like much longer and then more annoying to type out, you can select here where it says pelvis root, and then you can copy that and then paste it here. There you go. And then the new bone name we're going to rename to pelvis. Click on needs compiling. Back to SFM, we're going to re-import the model. And we have root transform, and we have root, which is fine, and then we have pelvis, and pelvis moves the entire model around like it should. So that's good. And hip, which if you recognize from, using TF2 models and Source 1 Filmmaker, maybe you'd have a hip bone and it would work pretty much like this. So we have hip, and it shouldn't disrupt, anything else in this regard. Move that leg, move the pelvis, good. Move the hip, good. How it should work. So if you have multiple models you're porting and you don't want to do this for every single bone, all this renaming, you just select all the bones you renamed, you'd go move into prefab. See, it created a prefabs folder, which I guess should have been the name of this. So, whatever. Prefabs. And then we'd name it something like No More Heroes 3 Bone Rename, or something like that. And then you'd save it, and then you could import it into another ModelDoc file whenever you want to. And if they have similar bone naming schemes, you will barely have to do any more manual changes. So in my case, I have a prefab that will probably not have all the correct bone names, but if we go, let me go grab it. So I have, for me, says Unreal Engine bone rename, but sometimes bones for Unreal Engine skeletons are not always the same, so this may not even be correct. However, if I import it using prefab, and going in this prefabs folder and selecting it, click on needs compiling, compile failed. Why? Well, it seems like it has a different naming scheme in this case, which is fine. We're going to flatten the prefab, which takes it out of the prefab and makes it completely separate from it. And you can see stuff like, well, you know, spine O2 is not the same as spine 2. So what you'd probably do is go through all of these and rename them and, switch out the names for the new names. In this case, at least the new bone names are correct, even if the original bone names aren't. So all you would need to change is the original bone names. I will be linking list prefab in the description to make it easier for you guys. So, spine, well, we need to rename to spine_0. Well, in this case, we don't have a spine 0, so we're going to delete that. We do, however, have a spine 1. We have a spine 01, so we're going to replace that with spine 01. And for now, normally you do needs compiling, but obviously it's not going to compile until all of these names are the correct ones. So if you really, really want to make sure it works, you disable this, all these ones that don't work, and then you go needs compiling, and it'll compile because these are disabled, and the ones that do work will still be renamed in SFM. So I'll probably speed through this in post, but I'll be renaming these to the correct naming schemes. So while renaming and testing all these bones, I ran into an issue. Well, I can see the bones that I renamed have changed colors to something more visible against the purple dots. However, it seems like in certain places, like the upper legs here and most of the arms here, aren't really connected the same way they are here in G-Man's skeleton. Why is that? Well, normally when I'm posing these arms, they work just fine. They are, all of these bones, they're named correctly, and they're named to source 2 standard. So when I go to, attach an IK rig, it says unable to iRig for bones that are too close to being in straight line. Oh, well, you go, so for some models, that's the case. Sometimes their default pose, their limbs aren't always like bent; they're always like too straight, and so it doesn't know where the elbow is. So we'll just bend a little bit. So now it knows the elbow is on that side, and that the inner arm is on the other side. Okay, well, now when I select it, it should attach the IK rig. Well, normally it would, however, in this case it won't. It says the same thing. Oh, that's kind of weird. Well, why is that? Well, the reason is because it thinks that this is the next bone in the line. Which, if you did this in real life, I would say go see a doctor. But now if we attach the IK rig, oh, no error this time. Well, yeah, that's a problem, and that probably hurts really bad for Travis. So sorry, Travis. So in this case, we will have to do bone reparenting. I mentioned bone reparenting before because I was thinking, when I tried to port this model before, I feel like I remembered needing to do that. Well, now I remember why. It's because of that. So now we need to go into Blender and make sure that the bones are parented correctly. So the problem is that if we go to, let's go clavicle L, upper arm, upper arm, upper arm. Notice how there's a bunch of upper arms here. And a bunch of lower arms. That's a lot of bones just to get to the hand. Well, see, these are twist bones. They're not really supposed to be in the main line of bones. So, the bone that's actually supposed to be rotated here is lower arm underscore O1 underscore L. But you can see there's O2 and O3 before it gets to the hand. And it's in the direct line of it. Well, what we need to do is we need to go to edit mode, select this hand bone, which you have selected. And go to relations, and instead of parenting this to the twist bone, we're going to switch this to the, elbow lower arm bone that it's supposed to be. So you can see it's disconnected from this one. However, it is still connected to this bone, which is what it should be. So we need to do the same for this bone, except, it's connected up to here to O3. It needs to have a relation to O1 instead. First of all, before we do anything, let's save this as WIP4 before we export and stuff. So that should, for the most part, fix the problem in that arm. We'll work on the left. We'll work on the other bones if we did it right. Got that new version in. Compile it. As you can see, the model spazzes out. No need to worry. Go to Utilities, Reattach to Model. Should be good. Although, usually, just in case, I just re-import the Travis model. Because sometimes leaving it in there kind of messes things up. But look at this. There is a bone connection here. And, it'll, a lot more convenient to animate with. So, we're going to try again. Right-click on Handle, attach IK rig. Oh, needs to be bent. Forgot about that. Bend it. Do it again. Now, it should be correct, which it is. Look at that. Now it moves how an arm should without breaking bones. Well, it is kind of there, but that's supposed to happen. Don't worry about it. You'll fix it with the clavicle and whatnot. Whatever you need to do when animating characters like this. So, let's check the twist bones just in case there isn't. You never need to bend them. You'll never need to bend this bone like this, so if it does that, that's fine. As long as it twists normally like this, it seems like that's fine. So we're just going to do this to all the other bones that are having issues with parenting. So, speed this up. And now look, you got those bone lines. They're in the arms and they're in the legs where they're supposed to be. And if we try to attach IK rig to the leg, ankle L, it'll should work the same for ankle R. It works just fine. Alright, and let me finish renaming all the fingers. I'll be right back. And now you can see his fingers have rubber lines now. Very convenient. Well, now that we're done with that, we can look here and see, Travis is kind of big compared to G-Man. And you want all your character models to be the correct size compared to other characters, relative to the proper height. So I always use G-Man as an example. This dude's probably like 6'2" or something like that. So we're going to go in Model Doc, change the import scale to something I think is reasonable, like 0.4. Go to SFM. Re-import the model because, yeesh. By the way, I wouldn't recommend making any like posters or animations with a model you are in the middle of porting, because if you make big changes, it might mess it up. And work that you have done will kind of like, not work. So that's actually much closer. And best way I think I would go about trying to adjust the scale is looking at either the size of the hands or the size of the head. But since Travis does not have a head currently, we're going to compare the size of the hands, which look about right. So I think we'll make Travis just a bit smaller, since I think G-Man is probably the average tallest person in the room. Gonna set that to like 37, 0.37. And it would be helpful to look up the height of the character you're porting as well, if you really want to be accurate. So I think for now we're going to hold off on the head, but before we get to the textures, let's, we got all these meshes connected together here. What if I only want them, one of them visible at once? Well, that's a reasonable thing to ask, because, for obvious reasons, you don't want all of these like that. So, one way you could do body groups to start with is to, you need these meshes, at least in ModelDoc itself, to be separated. So sometimes what I do is I'll like duplicate the mesh here, and then like I'll check only one mesh. So only one mesh is visible. And I'll do the same here for this mesh. So we got two different meshes here. And then this way we can do like, if we go to add, body group, set body group name, I'll just do Travis body. Name these for whatever you want for now. Since I'm not sure which is which, I'm just going to name it 1 and 2. We'll add a body group choice, and we'll add another body group choice. Now the first body group choice you add will be the one that's always on by default. So if you wanted these invisible by default, you'd actually set no mesh here. And you just set this to 1, and then you'd set this to 2. We compile it. See, right now it's invisible. But if we went up here, and then switch to 1, oh, there's one body group. And 2, there's the other body group, but it doesn't show both of them at the same time. However, if we just want one of them on, we'll delete this, and the next one is the default one. So now, there we go. So now, the default one is this mesh, and then we can switch it to the other one, and it's never invisible. In SFM, you can make it invisible if you want to, but in this case in ModelDoc, it's not by default. I haven't really tested this, but I feel like duplicating these meshes and then like hiding certain parts of it doesn't actually like hide them as far as optimization wise, so it may make it actually laggier to do it this way. If that is the case, Well, whether it's the case or not, what I'd like to do is just reset that back to what it was. We're going to go back to Blender, where we have all our meshes here. And what I'm going to do is create a collection for each different mesh. So we'll have this like Travis, and here's 3 main. And then the other ones like TSA, no coat. Number heroes 2. Number heroes 2, no coat, and so on. So we're just going to do this, every single one. Okay, so now that we have all of these, we'll just drag the correct meshes into their own specific collections. So now you can see all of these are in their separate, collections. However, they are still connected to the armature, so they should still work. So we're going to move this armature outside of Travis body, delete that collection. Then we're going to export all of these. So we'll just go selected objects. We're going to go back to the export folder and delete Travis_body. Have these export here. All right, that's all done. So we're just going to copy this. Delete Travis_body. Paste all of these. Go into ModelDoc. Delete the mesh currently. Before compiling, add in the new meshes. Make sure their scale is the same as before. 0.385. Okay. Oh. Didn't do this for every mesh. .385. There we go. Now it's all one size. And then I know these meshes already have names, but it won't put you in the body groups until you rename them like this. Okay, now that we have all those renamed, make all these body group choices. Add all of these meshes here. So now that we have all these here, we can switch through them as we please and see. You could test to see if all of them work, but most of the time they should work, and if they don't work, I'll fix it later. But look at that. Now we have all of these, and it's not just one jumbled up mesh of a whole bunch of models. And if we go back in SFM, you can see here, if we right-click on the model, go to body groups, all these body groups are here. So if we want to change it, we'll just uncheck that and then check this one. And of course, their bones and such will all move correctly as they should. So there you go. That's pretty much body groups in its simplest form.